This is going to be the first video of probably several about working on a John Deere Big 4 mower. And basically this is my first assessment. I have not heard back from the customer, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, whether I'm supposed to do guards and knife and all that stuff. But basically, again, the first assessment would be something like this. So you have a weld here, and you can't see it, but it actually goes all the way underneath. And that is so incredibly common on John Deere's. I it's a stretch to say that half of them are like that, but a lot of them are broken. A lot of them, they're sneaky. They can crack right here. I actually worked on one 2 days before I found a crack in it. They're really tricky. They can really hide. And the other place they break, John Deere's will break right here at these bolts right here. The tongue, they hit something and the tongue pulls away. There's only 2 bolts in there, and then there's 2 bolts here. I'm not going to say those 2 other bolts weaken it, but it does break right there along those bolt lines. So someone's obviously worked on this mower, and by the looks of it, it was just the farmer himself. I've actually done quite a few of his pieces here in the last couple years that you've seen. I did his grain binder. I don't think I brought the corn binder home, but I delivered him parts to do it. I think I did a hammer mill of his maybe 8-9 years ago already. So he's a fairly good customer. He pays on time and everything. But back to the mower. The difference between a McCormick and a John Deere, you see welded frames on a John Deere, and the thing is, you can't say anything about it because McCormick Deerings have the same problems. McCormick Deering number 9s. Oddly enough, McCormick Deering number 7s, very seldom are they broken for some reason. But some of the things on a John Deere Big 4 that are a little better than McCormick Deerings are number 1, the pawl holder. So this is a cap with inside held on by 3 bolts, and there's actually a seal here to potentially run oil inside there. The problem is this right here is the seal surface, and it's built right into the wheel, and very seldom are the surfaces good enough to actually hold a seal for the oil. So I really don't put oil in there because I don't have any hope of it holding out. I grease them up pretty good, and that's what I would tell you to do too if you have one. But this is a better system in my mind, kind of, than McCormick Deering. So McCormick Deering's, the pawl holder sits on the outside, and let me tell you, we've been here for 62 years. I do not have any. I sell so many and I use so many because they're broken all the time. Now this pawl holder in here, very seldom are they broken. Very seldom are they worn out. So something John Deere did works really well. That is one thing. Now, the problem is, or another problem, besides this wheel being a surface for an oil seal, and I'll probably take these wheels off and make another video, but that's a big oil seal right there. The problem with John Deere's, another problem with John Deere's are John Deere's brake axles. There's some weaknesses in the axles, the way they're made, that they will actually break. And the problem with John Deere's are they are a super complicated axle, unlike the McCormick Deerings, where it's just basically 2 holes and 3 keyways in an international. Any good machine shop can make it. In fact, anymore, I've been putting new axles in basically every number 9 that goes through the shop. The axle, the oil seal actually runs, or the axle is actually the seal surface for the oil seal. So when you put a new axle in there, basically you have something just like it come out of the factory. years and years ago. You can make that argument because very seldom do I put bearings in a McCormick Deering, so therefore you're going to have some up and down play with the number 9 axle. But the other thing is too, I very seldom ever in my life have gotten calls for bearings for the John Deere Big 4s or John Deere number 3s. So again, you have to think, number one, this is a better system because the bearings hold out better. Number two, I don't know why, because basically they're the same thing. They both have needle bearings in them and so forth. But, when I take that lid off, you can see the oil technically in the John Deere and the McCormick Deering can flow from the gearbox and splash out axle and work its way out to the wheels. And it probably does that. I don't know. I can't be inside the gearbox while it's running, but logically it does that. So in behind here, like I say, this is held on by 3 bolts, and I'll make a video of it later. And then you got a pawl holder in here that's held on by 1 bolt in the end here, and it just comes off, and the wheel comes right off too. McCormick Deerings, again, sometimes you will get frozen wheels, you will get frozen pawl holders on there quite often, which makes them a bear to take apart. If you are not a well-equipped shop, John Deere is just a lot easier to work with. As far as your flywheel shaft and your flywheel and the gear, it's basically the same process as the number 9 mower. The shaft goes back through the tubing. There's a bevel gear in the back. You unscrew the bevel gear, pull everything out the front. While I took the bolts off the gearbox lid, I have not looked inside the gearbox lid. Number 9s have super gearboxes. Very seldom do you have worn out gears or worn out teeth on the gears. They're just designed really, really well. The John Deere Big 4 is more like a number 7, and John Deere and McCormick Deering number 7s have the same kind of problems that John Deere's do, just because of the way the gearing is made. So let me see if I'm strong enough to take this off with one hand. I don't know what I am. I'm not a young man. I am. Okay. So the one thing, it's kind of a, let's stay with the gear since we've talked about this. So if you look at that gear there is actually pretty sharp, and you can actually see the wear on those teeth also, that they are pretty sharp, and the spur gear here is actually pretty sharp. So I would call that mower pretty well used. Now that back and forth there, that's one thing that John Deere has over McCormick Deering. That play right there, to take that out, you basically just pull that pin out, and I'm sorry it's dark, I know you can't see it, but pull that pin out, turn a slotted washer, and that will allow you to put more pressure, have less clearance between those 2 gears right there. That's one thing that John Deere's have an up over McCormick Deering, because McCormick Deering's basically you take paper thin shims out. I can honestly say I never do it. I just, you really have to guess in my mind if you're right or not and so forth, and to take it all apart, and the shims are thinner than a piece of paper, quite honestly. So I never do it, but this can be taken up with a washer here if you have to. But there's also a slotted washer where you just pull this pin out, turn the washer to a different groove, and that will allow you to move that over. Now, the other thing that McCormick Deering does not do as well as John Deere, or because of the design, basically. If you have a number 9, you'll notice the shifter seal leaks almost every time. In fact, the last video I did, showed my fix for that. But John Deere, because their oil seal is up here, when I say oil seal, it's actually just a piece of leather. It goes in behind that spring there, and that is your seal to keep the oil in your gearbox. And the only other thing is a freeze plug here, and I think that's it. Now, when it comes to taking it apart, John Deere's are quite a bit more complicated as far as taking the shifter lever off and working on that shifter lever, because it's just a lot of work there to do it right. You gotta unscrew nuts and unscrew the shaft and all that stuff. I also just had a question about why this gear here could slide back and forth on that axle. There's bolts here, and actually someone has been in here, because there should be wires here to keep these nuts from turning off, and their nuts were on there. And what happens with these big gears are they crack right here, and you really have to be careful when you have loose gear there, that it's not a cracked gear that's allowing it not to be able to tighten up. So that's just some of the little differences between a McCormick Deering. As far as taking the flywheel out, it's the same thing. You unscrew this gear, pull the shaft and everything right out the front. It's the same thing. It has a bearing here, it has a bushing here, just like a number 9. So you would do basically the same repair. In fact, the bushing looks very similar, and this has been a problem in the past too. They are so similar, you can't tell them apart by just looking at them. You have to mic them and everything else. You can actually get one in, but after you get it in, the pressure's so great that it collapses on your shaft and you can't get the shaft in. So John Deere, I think, I want to say, is a little bigger on the outside, but don't hold me to that. So the next thing we come to, and I wasn't, and again, I have not heard from the customer, so I'm not sure what all I'm supposed to do. But the other thing I look at too, that's dry around there, and unfortunately, again, you can't see it, it's dry because the gearbox is not dry, but it needs oil desperately. So once you get oil in there and it starts splashing around, this may no longer be dry. So, you know, and the other part of that too is there's actually probably enough oil in there to do the job of what it's supposed to do. The only thing you'd have to worry about is whether there's enough oil to flow down and oil that bronze bushing. The next thing we come to, this is a common problem with John Deere mowers. Your lift lever, this should have a wire running here with a squeeze lever here, and they are missing a lot. They don't work other times. They're bent a lot. If they're in good shape, this is probably a little better system than McCormick Deering's. McCormick Deering's rely on a lever that you flip over to kind of hold it up, and those levers are bad, and the replacements, they're made out of metal, but the metal's so soft they just don't work very well. But both of them are spring assist, so both of them have a spring tensioner on there to help your cutter bar float, number 1, to help you raise it, number 2. The other big problem with John Deere's is, and McCormick Deering has the same issue, not so much that theirs break. Well, they do break, but these break a lot. Enough so that there's some Amish shops making new steel ones, and that one is not broken. I'll have to, once I take the tension off of it, to see how much wear is in it. And the wheels are pretty good. Obviously, I'm not going to do anything there unless he specifically asks me to. The next thing we come to is a timing bar. I am not a fan of John Deere timing bars. I suppose they're a little better than McCormick Deering's. I don't even try and save McCormick Deering's anymore. I take them off and throw them right in the scrap pile and put new ones on, because These threads, obviously there's a thread on the male part and a thread on the female part. On a McCormick Deering, you never know how bad they are until they give way. And then once they give way, now you're bringing in coupling bars, you're potentially breaking pitmans, so forth. That's why I don't try and save them. They're impossible to judge how good they are. Now, the one thing John Deere has, you can't see it, but there's actually a screw underneath here that you can actually close that thread up on your male threads if you deem necessary. So that is one thing that John Deere, I think, probably has a little better get-go than McCormick Deering. I don't know. I'm not real happy with either one of them, but I would have to give John Deere the nod on your timing bar up front. As far as coupling bars go, I have never ever had a bent coupling bar that was bad enough that you had to rebend it or anything like that, as opposed to McCormick Deering that you have to rebend about every time you work on a mower. So yeah, that coupling bar, obviously I'll try and save it unless the customer says something different. As far as this linkage goes here, this and International are totally different than each other. New Ideas mowers use something like this, but other than that, that is a totally different lift system than McCormick Deering. And as far as cutter bar, basically what works on a John Deere cutter bar works on a McCormick Deering cutter bar, except for this stuff right here. This stuff right here is John Deere specific. The wear plate, the cap, the ledger plate, that's all John Deere only. So, there's not a lot to talk about there. The one way the McCormick Deering has a little edge on a John Deere uses 2 bolts to hold that bar onto their shoe. And when you're working on them and you're trying to get that spacing with shims and everything just perfect, the 3rd bolt on the IH is so much better, because every time you loosen up a John Deere, that bar wants to separate from the shoe, and you got to figure out some way to hold it, especially if you're working by yourself. So it kind of makes it hard. But with that 3rd bolt there, all the 3rd bolt does is just keep tension on the shoe and the bar, and that way you can take these nuts off at will to put more shims in or take shims out. So yeah, that's one thing that McCormick Deering has better than John Deere, in my opinion. Now let's talk about timing. So timing on a McCormick Deering number 9, this coupling bar actually unthreads out of this casting here. And so what John Deere does, if you look how this is made right here, you'll see a notch here. So, and then the bar has a kind of a ring around it. So what you do is you take this cap off here, and to get your timing, basically you move washers from this end to this end, or from washers from this end to this end, and that will move your bar out or in depending on where the washers are. So much better than McCormick Deering. I mean, McCormick Deering, you have to put it together, and if it's not right, you have to take it all back apart, unscrew it, put it back together. If it's not right, you take it apart again, unscrew it or screw it in or whatever you need to do, and that's how you would adjust the timing on a McCormick Deering. But this John Deere system, while not perfect, it's so much better than McCormick Deering. Now, the other thing about this is, for some reason, John Deere shoe pins, the pins wear out, and I won't say the holes don't wear, but the holes do not wear as much as they do in McCormick Deering for some reason. And so I just don't know why that is, because it's basically the same thing. So whether John Deere used better metal, softer pins, and the pins wore out first, I don't know what the reason is, but for some reason, The holes on McCormick Deerings in the hinge and the shoe both wear a lot harder on McCormick Deerings than they do on John Deere. Well, obviously, that's an opinion. I don't have any measurements to back it up, but working on mowers year after year after year, it's just kind of something you see. Now, what John Deere does have a problem with, and I've showed this before, is John Deere has a problem down here at these shoe bolts. They're, for some reason, the bottom of this shoe wears really hard to the point where it's so thin that it can actually twist or bend or just wear away. The holes that the bolt goes in are always worn, or worn quite often. In fact, I've taken to welding them shut and re-drilling them, just so I have a nice hole to work with, and that's one way to fix it. But some of them are unfixable just because of the twist in them and how much wear they have and so forth. So it's kind of a wash between McCormick Deering and John Deere. You just have to accept the fact that neither of them are perfect. It's a wash. The tilt lever, basically the same design, a little different way of doing it, but the same design as far as the tilt lever goes. There's not really a big problem with either one of them. Your outer shoe, and again, like I said before, my videos are never going to be edited. I don't want to do it. My lighting is horrible. I apologize for that. This is for people's benefit who work on mowers for the first time or want to know how to work on mowers. I think my videos have something to offer, but they're definitely not going to be fancy. As far as your draft bracket goes, basically if it works on a John Deere, it works on a McCormick Deering. The draft rod is different. It's a different style. Technically you use the same thing. Again, the same guards on a McCormick Deering you can put on an International. Same with a knife, same with the clip, same with the wear plates. So yeah, that's it. I talked to this guy 4 months ago, 3 months ago, and he told me what he wanted, and I just don't remember. I know he had quite a thrill because he actually broke the seat stem while he was using it, so that put him on the ground. He wasn't real happy about that, so I know I'm supposed to do that, but obviously I didn't bring the mower home to put a seat stem on it. The wear in the gearbox, I probably won't touch any of that. I'll probably take some play out of it, and then we'll go from there. After that, he must want me to do the cutter bar. The cutter bar is definitely worn. Whether I can get it back with just some clips and readjusting it, I don't know. And this is another thing. This is kind of rare in our area. I've run into it a couple times, but this is a stub guard mower, meaning typically a guard would come out here. These are basically stub guards from top to bottom, and a lot of these guys, I think they would like it if they tried it, but a lot of them are afraid to try it. So yeah, if he wants that, that's a problem because I can no longer find those stub guards. The company I got them from are no longer making them. So yeah, I would imagine it's just getting a tune-up, not a total rebuild. I was gonna take the wheels off, but I don't even think I'm going to until I talk to him, because there's no real reason to, unless he tells me there's a problem. I'll jack it up and back it up and see what it feels like. And I talked about the axle on the John Deere's having a problem, and they break inside of here. I think, don't get mad at me if I'm wrong, but there's two versions of this. One of them has a hexagon or a six-sided spline built right into the axle that gears goes over. And where that spline is, that weakens the axle, and they actually break right there in the edge of the spline. I can't remember if it's this side or that side. logically it's probably that side. Actually, I don't know if there's logic behind it. So this is what makes the axles on a John Deere Big 4 very hard to replace, and it's a big problem because you need a pretty special machine shop who has that kind of talent and tools to make this axle. So it's got a spline kind of built right into it here, or press fit, or heat shrunk, I should say, onto that axle. I think the other ones are held in with two rivets that you can't see. They're kind of countersunk and so forth. So that, again, the axle is a problem, and that's not it though, because your pawl holder actually has a spline in it too, in the axle. So you've got a spline cut in this end. You have a spline that's bigger than the axle there, and then on the other end for that pole holder, you also have a spline in the axle. So it's a near impossible shaft to make unless you live in a lot bigger area than I do that has machine shop, and then I would be afraid to know what they're going to charge you for it. And you, again, 62 years in business, I don't have any. So they're tough. And I know an Amish shop that used to really specialize in these John Deere Big 4s, I don't know how they got away with it, but they were actually welding axles for a while. And it's not something I would do, because if a pure axle couldn't handle the stress, I just don't see a weld like that working on an axle for a John Deere Big 4. So it's a pretty long-winded video, and I apologize for that. But this is the first of maybe one or two. Again, I'm not going to go into the gearbox, I don't think, unless the customer asks me to. So I'm not really going to be able to show you that or anything. And I don't want to do it for fun, because they're not fun. But I think I just don't know what all I want's done. But we're supposed to get snow tomorrow, so it's in the shop ahead of time. And I'll wait for his phone call. Thank you.